Continuing Chapter 12, Letter Writing, A Service to Society, from You Can Change the World, The Christopher Approach, by James Keller. One of the outstanding Hollywood motion picture reporters stated recently that the effect of constructive letters has been to change for the better much of the content of her movie gossip columns. Mothers and fathers all over the country, it appears, had written so many letters to her, protesting in a friendly but determined way about the strengthening of the trend towards divorce through constant references to Hollywood marital breakups, that she finally came to see the importance and reasonableness of their opinions. In the Reader's Digest, George E. Outland, a congressman from California, recently pointed out that every morning at 10 o'clock in our nation's capital finds the 435 representatives and the 96 senators doing the same thing, reading their mail. Congressmen may miss committee meetings, he said, absent themselves from the floor, fail to show up for roll calls and votes, but they always read their mail. 60,000 letters a day pour into Congress. One single district alone sends its national legislators 125 letters each and every day. From their mail, Congressman Outland continued, our representatives in Washington know what the people back home want and expect, yet it must not be thought that they simply take the total number of letters for an issue and the total against the same issue and decide which is the heavier pile. One thoughtful letter will outweigh half a dozen which seem to say, vote for this or vote for that. One spontaneous outburst on your own stationery is worth 100 mimeographed letters or newspaper clippings in some write your congressman drive. Multigraphed telegrams are a dime a dozen. Don't waste your time signing canned letters or copying letters someone has prepared. One man who's been in Congress for 10 years says that the letters which really count are those that show your legislative representatives three things. 1, that it is you yourself doing the writing. 2, that you know something about the subject. 3, that you have done some thinking. If every voter wrote one letter like that once a year, says this legislator, I believe we'd have a 50% better Congress. The power of a good letter, therefore, should never be underestimated. A single letter, sometimes even a brief note, has been known to change the course of life for many a man and woman. A few good letters, timely and sincere, have been able to influence the thinking of millions. I still got that burnt on my finger. My fingers. Making your opinion heard. Many people fail to write letters because they have the attitude, what good will it do? What's done is done. How faulty this reasoning is can be best illustrated by what one of the leading executives of a large radio corporation said in defending the type of programs his company aired to the radio public. If you don't get all the educational programs you want, he said in effect, if you don't get the kind of music you like, the kind of comedy, mystery story, soap opera, or whatever else you wish, it's your own fault. We listen to our listeners. They make our programs. The power you can exert, not only in radio, but in all spheres of influence once you become articulate as well, was well illustrated not long ago by what happened to a chain of motion picture theaters in the Midwest. This particular theater chain made no distinction in the sort of programs they showed on Friday evenings and the features they displayed on Saturday afternoons for children. One mother thought there should be a distinction. She thought weekend movies ought to be adapted to the needs of the children who attended in large numbers. You ought to have pictures more suitable for youngsters, she wrote the head of the theater chain. Instead of glamour and the gunplay of gangsters, why not substitute wholesome films, some of the better westerns, for example, or travelogues or comedies? Youngsters oughtn't to be exposed to the atmosphere of the roadhouse, the police blotter, the divorce court. They shouldn't spend several hours of their time each week seeing pictures which instill in them unrealistic desires for slick limousines, penthouses, and lives of ease and luxury, as so many current movies do. Such films only give them a false perspective of life. The management brushed the letter aside as the theater executive frankly admitted. Just let her cool off, was his terse comment. She'll forget the whole thing. But the lady didn't forget. She wasn't a crank, and she wouldn't be ignored. Off she went, to the two groups in her hometown to which she belonged, a Catholic society and a civic garden club. She tackled her friends in both organizations, urging them to write to the management. She recommended that their letters be brief, courteous, and firm. The rejection to these public expressions of opinion was not long in coming. Such a volume of letters poured in that the management reluctantly decided to shift over temporarily to the kind of pictures requested, though they were fully convinced the proposition wouldn't work. Attendance would drop off, they said. They'd lose money, and with it the reputation for being smart businessmen. Now, one of the things also that we find in that sort of thing is that they're also connected to other business, and they put in the movies that, will produce a sense of lacking or whatever that, gets those purchases made. Or, people just want more and more films and all that sort of thing, at the very least. But things turned out quite differently from what they had expected. We not only make everybody happy, the head of the theater chain exclaimed afterwards, but we make much more money under the new arrangement, as a matter of fact, than we did under the old. In Rochester, New York, a young high school girl recently wrote the editor of that city's newspaper, the Times-Union. All of us have been reading lately of the shocking rise in the divorce rate. Too little is being done to correct the situation. Novels and the motion pictures furnish us with escapist literature, when what is needed is something to bring us sharply to our senses and keep a sacred ceremony from becoming a pitiful farce. This girl went on to advocate the use of all means possible to emphasize and make Americans aware of the sacredness and dignity of marriage and the vows they had sworn to keep. The letter so impressed the editor of the Times-Union that he declared in an editorial, "A contributor to our Readers' Forum today has a suggestion that should not be allowed to go the way of yesterday's newspaper. It cries for action. Divorce and tandem marriages are glamorized on every hand. A few weeks ago, the idols of American youth in two other top interests ran off with the other men's wives, and after hasty divorces, married them. Society must do something to make youths believe in marriage, or at least more neighborly behavior, right? Our correspondent may not have the whole answer, but it is an idea that should be kicked around and looked at from all angles until a scheme that can be realized comes out of it. An occasional letter sometimes demands more forceful language than normally is used. The written reply appearing in Time magazine of one labor leader to the appeal of William Z. Foster, chairman of the Communist Party, for funds to fight the Mundant-Nixon bill is one such letter. It met with such a storm of enthusiastic approval that its good effects will continue for some time to come. The labor leader, Harry Lundeberg, boss of the West Coast AFL Sailors Union of the Pacific, wrote Foster the penetrating reply that he had a nerve appealing to a bona fide American trade union for help in view of the scabby destructive tactics employed by your so-called political party against the American trade union movement and against the United States as a whole. All through your letters, Lundeberg went on, you refer to fascism, stating that your party is anti-fascist. Yeah, it turns out that the anti-fascist of the 20s to the 20s were even more fascist and supported even more murderous, oppressive people than, the so-called enemies. It's just the same group, same flag, same whatever. The flag's in different languages depending on where you look and what time period and whatnot, but it's the same group. Who are you kidding? Well, I'm not saying that this is talking about the anti-fascist party of Europe or something back in or America or something, but now, it was bought off and moved over. But anyways, who are you kidding? There are no bigger fascists then the communist. The only difference between Stalin and Hitler is that Stalin went. Hitler won better. It was the Communist Party that joined hands with the Nazis to break up the Socialist Party and the trade union movement in Germany. Don't try to propagandize people who know the score. That's the same. That's dead-on truth. The NSDAP was not right-wing. It was on the left. Sure, just like the communists, they, oh, look at how you're being oppressed. And, so they come in with some right-wing values, but they kind of, become authoritarian, right? As a matter of fact, our organization classes the Communists Party as an enemy of the working class. As far as we are concerned, they can take the whole scabby, stinking Communist Party and kick it in the middle of Siberia and let it have a taste of Uncle Joe Stalin's slave camps. It is our considered opinion that this is a fit place for the American Communist Party, its stooges, its fellow travelers, long-haired ones, short-haired ones, and what have you. The letter of a woman officer, a woman office worker from Buffalo, New York, in a particularly necessary piece of legislation up for congressional consideration, won a public tribute from Senator Ives of the Empire State for the workers' interest. Not only that, this woman was instrumental in prodding thousands of her fellow citizens to make their voices heard in favor of the measure. This is how it happened. Certain anti-American elements who were working hard to defeat the bill had flooded both the House of Representatives and the Senate with letters and telegrams of vilification and protest. Senator Ives, speaking of this situation, indicated many letters in opposition to the proposed legislation had been received, and he referred to the city of Buffalo as one point of origin for a goodly portion of them. One person, however, an office worker named Betty Baldwin, by a simple, sincere letter, set in motion a whole series of events that did much to dispel the bad impression left by the actions of the subversives. One man, prominent in Buffalo's civic affairs, immediately upon learning of this, sent 6 telegrams to important members of Congress in Washington, and countless other public-spirited citizens followed suit. When questioned as to why she had written her letter in the first place, Miss Baldwin replied, "I am a Christopher. Last spring in New York City, when the Actors' Equity Association, representing the acting profession in the legitimate theater, met to elect a new slate of officers, a few typewritten words on a yellow piece of paper helped to prevent the left-wingers in the association from gaining control. These leftists, numbering about 60% of the total members of 2,000, were apparently dissatisfied with the regular ticket selected by the nominating committee, which in turn had been chosen by the general membership. They nominated an independent ticket, a permissible procedure, at the meeting discussing the candidates for and against. Broadway star Burt Lytell got up and made a speech in favor of those of the regular slate. The leftists countered with a barrage of telegrams and letters, favoring their candidates and aimed especially at influencing the younger members of the association. At the height of the excitement, Lytell got the floor again and pulled just one telegram out of his pocket. He proceeded to read it aloud. It was an enthusiastic endorsement of the regular ticket, signed by Catherine Cornell. A hush fell over the audience. The younger members, previously extremely vocal in their opinions, were the most silent of all, much as they might have wished to. They could not dispute this telegram from the First Lady of the American stage. In the election which followed, 7 out of 10 of the regular ticket were elected. That one voice in the form of a telegram made the difference. A parent writing to the New York World Telegram a few months ago crystallized for thousands of people their appreciation of the protection given them by their Board of Education in the matter of safeguarding a fundamental principle of the American educational system, respect for the religious convictions of all our citizens. The correspondent, Miss M.N. Bonbrake, wrote, "I think it is time a parent speaking for many parents came to the defense of our superintendent of schools, Dr. Jansen, and our Board of Education regarding this much discussed ban on the Nation magazine. Not long ago, Dr. Jansen and the Board of Education decided to ban The Nation magazine from public school libraries after it had published a series of 6 strongly anti-Catholic articles. At that time, Dr. Jansen gave to the press this reason for the ban. A child's religion is a sacred thing between himself and his parents. Well, if they hit puberty, they really, should have the full choice of that. But, and we have no right to put into the hands of one pupil a magazine article attacking the religion of his classmate. The fundamental principle of the educational system of our great city is respect for the faiths of all our children. I would like to congratulate Dr. Jensen and the Board of Education for defining tolerance in the wisest and most understanding words I have ever heard from a public official. Had these articles been anti-Semitic? Don't call Jews Semitic if they're white. Semitic is a race, a brown-skinned race with black woolly hair. Being descendants of converts from Russia or Germany or Turkey or something doesn't make you Semitic. It kind of proves you're not. Kaiser Jews, as they're called. Anti-Protestant or anti-Negro. Well, if they're talking about abuses or some anti-science thing, whatever, they don't necessarily have to bring up that this religion teaches this or this religion teaches that. They can just say against what's been proven wrong. People have different beliefs. That's not the same thing as proving things wrong, but yeah. Dr. Jansen and the Board of Education would have acted in the same manner. What about anti-Aboriginal or whatever? Again, they should have acted in the same manner. They have done so in the past. It is a great comfort to all parents in New York City to know that the faith of every child in the city schools, whether he be a Catholic, a Protestant, or a Jew, is being protected at all times with complete impartiality. Dr. Jansen is not himself a Catholic. His action was based on the highest motives and with the general welfare of the school children of New York City in mind. The cleanup drive started by comic book publishers over the country is definitely attributable to the weight of public opinion brought to bear by educators and parent groups through direct contact on and an even wider scale through the medium of letter writing. Many of these publishers were persuaded to approve of a code of moral standards, which will apply to over 15 million of the 50 million comic books sold every month. The balance of the major comic book publishers are expected to accept this code shortly. From these, and literally thousands of other letters which could be listed, it should be evident that a letter with a constructive message can be a great force for good, and that it can be an even greater force for determining public policies than are those letters whose only purpose is to confuse, to intimidate, and to vilify. Preliminary preparation for good letter writing. In letter writing, as in any other kind of writing, there are certain preliminary rules which anyone hopes to persuade others to see the point he or she is trying to make would do well to follow. First of all, there is the remote preparation. This consists of 1 observation, 2 reading, and 3 reflection. Anyone can train his or her powers of observation and learn to see accurately and to retain what he or she sees. The importance of reading what goes on in the world in newspapers, in magazines, and in books hardly needs any emphasis. In addition to being a valuable aid in letter writing, it is one of the contributing factors to a well-rounded education. Observing and reading are of little use, however, unless people acquire the habit of reflection on what has been observed and read. The man who does not reflect, as Cardinal Newman said, sees the tapestry of human life as it were on the wrong side, and it tells no story. Though not a technical role like those of observation, reading and reflection, being sincere, is just as important to good letter writing as any other quality which covers mere mechanical proficiency. We will never succeed in influencing others through our letters if, in order to make an impression, we pretend to possess what we do not actually have. It is much better to utilize, as best we can, what we do know. We should stick to the facts and express our own honest feelings. To do otherwise, to give expression to thoughts that are not our own, is to court difficulties. Specific laws to follow. All writing, letter writing, essay writing, book writing, short story or novel writing, is based on 4 fundamental laws. 1, unity. 2, coherence. 3, emphasis. for interest. Unity means that the letter must be about one thing, just as good business practice insists that commercial correspondence limits itself to one topic, in exchange of notes. Unity is achieved without too much effort, simply by asking oneself the question, what do I want to say? Before taking pen in hand or sitting down at the typewriter, failure to ask this question is responsible for the greatest number of mistakes in any sort of writing. For your letter to have coherence, one part should follow after another, logically and naturally. Material should be arranged so that its order of importance is apparent to the reader. Some parts of your letter, of course, will be more important than others, so that you will want to make certain things stand out. This involves what is known as positioning of ideas, which, properly done, makes for emphasis. People tend to remember what most comes at the beginning, and what comes at the end of any piece of writing. If anything, the last thought expressed is remembered best of all, but an effort should be made to have letters so interesting that readers will read to the end. The proportion of space you devote to any one idea is quite likely to be the measure of how you would want to impress that idea on those who have read your letter. The most effective way to capture the reader's interest is to use more concrete matter freely. Examples, illustrations, comparisons, stories, descriptions, factual reference from newspapers, magazines, etc. will aid in this. They will help to rivet the attention of the reader to the ideas you wish to put across. The dull letter seldom succeeds in impressing anyone. Give yourself to your letters. Understand what you are writing about. Gather sufficient evidence to support the point you are trying to make. Present your ideas attractively. Be brief but not curt. Use a moderate tone in all your letters. Friendly, constructive criticism, if that is your intention, will accomplish far more than angry outbursts. It is the old story mentioned elsewhere in this book of disagreeing without being disagreeable. The head of an Eastern manufacturing concern, who wrote to one of the movie studios regarding a picture he felt put crime in too favorable light, illustrates the point very well. After commending the studio for its efforts in the past to keep its entertainment standards high, he stated in detail his objection to the film in question, and he concluded with all these well-chosen words: "If I am wrong, please overlook this letter. If I am right, I am happy to be able to call your attention to what must be an oversight of your splendid organization. Regarding the technical construction of your letter, it is suggested that you make an outline if it is at all possible. It will help you to follow the laws of good letter writing. Keep your paragraphs short, 3 to 5 sentences, and your sentences correspondingly brief, 15 to 25 words. Use language with which your reader will be familiar. Avoid slang or trite, hackneyed phrases. Whenever possible, begin with an anecdote, a case history, or by posing a problem. End with a summary, and make your last sentence one that will linger in your reader's mind. One authority sums this all up in these words: logical organization, avoidance of cliches and jargon, adequate transitional aids, and other such rhetorical maneuvers will help marvelously in sustaining reader interest. But in my opinion, the two stylistic devices which most contemporary editors are seeking are conversational quality and concreteness. You may not always be writing to an editor, of course, but these rules apply whether you're writing to a publication, to your congressman, to your local legislative representative, to a radio station or motion picture studio, or to some organization or society. These rules are not arbitrary enactments of grammarians. They are based upon sound psychology, upon an insight into human nature, and in writing letters, it is human nature with which you have to deal. As for style, fundamentally, any particular approach to writing is but a thinking out, put into language, providing you mean what you say, and say what you mean. There will not be any need for striving after an effect. Pretentiousness here is anywhere else in life. As anywhere else in life may antagonize rather than persuade. I've been antagonized a lot, so excuse my An example of good letter writing. The following letter to Life magazine is illustrative of what we mean. Its friendly tone, its objectiveness, its stress on decency in the presentation of printed and pictorial material, and its sincere belief that the editors of the publication to which it was sent would give their earnest consideration, could not fail to have made a favorable impression. The letter reads, "Gentlemen, like millions of other housewives, I have been a reader of Life magazine for several years. In fact, I never miss an issue. I find each and every issue crammed with interest. I should not like to have to do without it. But I am beginning to wonder if I ought to keep on taking life into my home. As a mother of 2 children, I am keenly aware of the problem of juvenile delinquency. Fortunately, so far, I have had no personal contact with the problem, but I am not so naive as to suppose that it can't happen here in my own home. We all know that impressions received through the eye are by far the most powerful, and it is well known that juvenile delinquents admit under questioning that many of their criminal activities are induced, fed, and fostered by the kind of reading material, usually pictorial, with which they come in contact. On these grounds, it seems to me that many of the pictures and advertisements in Life are questionable. In fact, it seems as though every issue carries a large number of pictures of bathing beauties, dressed so scantily as easily to incite young people to seek excitement and adventure. J. Edgar Hoover has repeatedly pointed out the unfortunate effect of this search for thrills and has blamed poisonous reading matter. Therefore, my problem amounts to this. With a growing boy and a growing girl in the house, ought I to buy Life? Some people take the unrealistic attitude that all that is needed is sound home training, and then there need be no fear at all about exposing youngsters to any sort of incitement to evil. That this is not true can easily be shown by an examination of the records of child guidance clinics over the country. The best home training is no insurance against delinquency. Mothers must make every effort to prevent the malleable characters of their children from being molded into the curious shapes of evil one finds everywhere. The curious shapes of evil one finds everywhere today. So there it is, my dilemma. I want to keep on getting Life magazine because it affords me pleasure, but I must safeguard the mental health and emotional stability of my children. Maybe the solution to my problem is in your hands. Life could go on being beautiful without the bathing beauties. In fact, it would be in better taste. Knowing that you are always open to suggestions, I feel sure you will take this in the spirit in which it is offered. Sincerely yours. Write a note of appreciation. In all this discussion on good letter writing, with a constructive message, there should be mentioned an additional type of correspondence, which is almost equally important, namely the note of appreciation. People and organizations welcome constructive criticism and suggestions. A letter of praise for a job well done is a powerful stimulant for preserving effort along the same lines. Even a brief note of encouragement often has far-reaching results. Among the thousands of letters, telegrams, and telephone calls of appreciation which poured into the American Broadcast Company not long ago, praising the network's documentary broadcast, Communism, U.S. brand, was this note of appreciation from a listener. This program was brilliantly written and produced, and a special tribute to your courage and vision. As a sincerely appreciative American, may I earnestly hope that this is only the beginning of many, many more of the same type of program under your completely able guidance. May God bless you in all your undertakings. Letters like this are incentives to continue the good work in the future. Here are 6 reactions to such notes sent by Christophers. All are in a similar vein, yet even in the slight variation of the wording, all show a profound sense of gratitude that people have taken the time to inform them of their interest. Greatly appreciated your letter, wrote one outstanding columnist to a reader. I get my share of unfavorable mail, so letters like you are doubly welcome. I appreciate the encouragement we received in letters like yours was the grateful acknowledgement of a school superintendent to a public-spirited correspondent, from Time magazine to a letter writer who praised the publication for a splendid article. Thank you very much for your warming note. Showed it to all hands concerned, and they were naturally much pleased. Answered Newsweek to another writer, thank you very much for taking the time to let us know you like the story. Wrote Julius Adler, general manager of the New York Times, to another reader. Thank you for your generous commendation upon my recent talk before the Chaplains Association regarding the outlawing of communism, which I highly appreciate. It is most heartening to know, replied one prominent official in the State Department to a correspondent, that I have your support in undertaking what promises to be a difficult Although, interesting assignment. Of course, it is quite possible that you may not receive any reply to the letters you have sent to editors, government officials, civic leaders, and others. Don't be surprised at this. Persons in such positions are usually so deluged with work that no matter how impressed they may be with what you have to say, they often have neither the time nor the faculties to tell you so. However, your letter registers, even if they cannot thank you for it. One of America's foremost magazines with a tremendous circulation passes through 35 different hands every constructive letter received. Even if the letter is utterly opposed to their editorial policy, it receives the same attention they give to pleasant notes of commendation. So whether you do or do not receive an answer matters little. I don't know why I keep messing up. What does matter is that you are on the alert, reaching others with sound, healthy ideas. Your letters, you may be sure, are read, and they do have their effect. 1 letter a week. You could easily write 1 letter a week, whether it be of praise or of constructive criticism. In some instances, you might even be able to write 1 good letter a day. All it takes is a few minutes of your time and a 3-cent stamp. And all you have to do is make sure your letter is a good letter. Remembering these principles. 1, write as you would to a friend. Be personal and not impersonal. 2, be constructive, not destructive. 3, be specific, not vague. 4, make your point, but don't keep repeating it. 5, be brief, but not curt. 6, be yourself. Think for yourself. Write for yourself. 7, write as you would talk. 8, offer a positive suggestion. Don't just complain. 9, inject a friendly feeling along with the facts. 10, be neat and be sure to sign your name and address clearly. Letters without addresses are disregarded. Like the young woman in Buffalo, who, asked why she wrote to Senator Ives, replied, "I'm a Christopher." You can make the thoughts you put down on paper perform a real service to society. As a Christopher, you have the responsibility to express your opinion on every subject which affects you and your neighbors. By a few lines you may send to the newspaper, some movie studio or radio station, to some local or national legislator. You may be the means of bringing untold numbers that much nearer to the God-given principles on which our republic is founded, and you may likewise bring untold numbers to a better appreciation of the truth for which Christ suffered and died. And whether or not he suffered or died, or no matter what number of Christ, a Lucifer is somebody who brings out a light, somebody who illuminates a matter. And light is in good and truth and all that sort of stuff. So their authentic opinion, their search for freedom, and you don't have to interfere with other people's freedom in order to strengthen your own.